Well, hey there, it's Christa Watson here from Christa Quilts, and on this week's video, I'm excited to tell you all about my Christa Quilts notions that I've developed with Brewer. It's a set of 5 tools that I use on every single quilt that I make. So we'll start off with what I think is my favorite, even though I know you're not supposed to have favorites. It's kind of like having a favorite child. These are my wonderful batting shears. Look how big these are. These scissors are 11.5 inches long and they cut through thick batting like butter. They're perfect for right-handed use, which is what I am, but you can also wear them left-handed. Forgive me for the lefties out there if I'm holding these incorrectly, but no matter which hand you hold them in, they're very comfortable. And of course, the cutest thing is they have my little Christa Quilts logo right there on the blades, so you know that there's something special. The coolest thing about these scissors is they really make it easy to cut through thick batting. So let's take a look and I'll demonstrate for you. So one of the things that makes the process easier for me is I buy my batting by the roll. Then I am able to unroll a whole bunch of the batting and I basically cover the width of whatever quilt I'm doing. Then with my scissors, I can just cut through, and I'm actually cutting through 2 layers of batting. This roll is 90 inches wide or long, and so that takes care of a majority of the quilt that I'm going to need batting for. For this particular quilt, because it was small enough, I'm actually able to get 2 pieces of batting out of 1 folded cut. I actually made this quilt 2 different times. You can check out my other videos to see that. And so basically what I'm doing is I'm just zipping along right along the top and cutting through that thick batting. It's effortless, it's easy. This really changes my quilting life. Now here's another quilt where I am trimming up the batting after I have completely basted the quilt. So I basically cut off a big huge chunk of batting for the quilt, and now I'm trimming up the areas around the edges, only leaving about 1 inch or 2. So this is what it looks like when I'm actually cutting at regular speed. It hasn't been speeded up. And you know what I do with those leftover chunks? I set those aside and I save them for practicing machine quilting before I actually quilt the real quilt. So with the batting scissors, I can quickly and easily trim around all sides, even while it's still attached to my design wall. And now I will speed it up to kind of show you how I can just zip through it very quickly. So for this particular quilt, it's actually a king size quilt, and that is quite a bit of batting. So after I basted it on a couple of tables outside, I'm trimming up the extra backing fabric and batting. By the way, all of these quilts that I'm showing you as I'm using these tools, these are quilts that I have made and I've either filmed tutorials or I'm going to be sharing them in the future. So make sure you like and subscribe my YouTube channel so you can actually see the full videos of everything that I'm showing you. But these batting scissors just work wonderfully to just cut through all of that excess. And one of the reasons I like trimming off the excess is so that when I'm machine quilting, I don't have as much bulk under the machine. So the batting scissors really help out with that. And just for fun, here is another quilt where I am trimming it up on my design wall using the scissors. As you can see, they work for a wide variety of quilts. Pretty much my process is I roll out the batting or I lay it on the floor and I put my quilt top and the fabrics on top of my batting and I kind of pre-measure it. Then after I baste it and I've left a lot of extra batting, I go back and I trim all the excess. I'm only trimming so there's about 1 or 2 inches all the way around 4 sides so that the quilt does not flip under itself while I'm machine quilting. So as you can see, these batting scissors really make quick work of trimming off that excess. And then later on, when I'm ready to bind the quilt, I just trim off the edges like normal. But you can also use the batting scissors at that time too. What's also really nice is because the batting scissors open up so wide and they cut through so much of the quilt at one time, it really reduces wear and tear on my hands and I don't get any hand fatigue at all. They're very comfortable and ergonomic and it makes the whole process so much easier. The next thing that I use whenever I'm machine quilting are my machine quilting gloves that are super comfortable. Now, they're one size fits all, and they're made out of a very comfortable, stretchy nylon material, so I can just put them on, and the best thing is if you're quilting when it's a little bit chilly, They give you a little extra warmth in your hands. So they've got, again, my cute little Christa Quilts logo here, and they have little grippy dots that make it so easy when you're pushing the quilt under the machine. They give you just the grip you need so it reduces hand fatigue. And what's really awesome about these is they're washable. Now, you can be quilting a white quilt with white thread and they're still gonna get dirty, but you can either wash them when you're wearing your hands, you can throw them into the washing machine, it's totally fine. And the coolest thing is you can wear them on either hand. Now, I like to quilt where you can see my logo up, but if you wanna turn them over and you wanna quilt with the logo inside, that's perfectly fine too. It gives you more wear and tear, the fact that you can switch gloves to either hand. And of course, because they have my logo on them, you're going to quilt magically while you're wearing them. So here's a recent quilt I finished, and I just want to show you how much of a difference the gloves make when I'm quilting the quilt. Those grippy dots really allow me to grip the quilt and push it through the machine, and I have enough strength in my fingers even when I only have to grab the edges when I'm quilting right next to the edges. That really helps me hold on to that quilt so that I can stitch smoothly. And now it's really important when it's time for me to rotate and scrunch and smush the quilt. Those grippy dots on the glove give me a lot of grip, and so it's very easy to smush that quilt and manipulate it underneath the machine. A lot of times when you are machine quilting, you can have a lot of wear and tear on your hands, a lot of hand fatigue because you're moving this big bulky quilt. But wearing the gloves makes that a lot easier, and it basically gives you more pushing power when you're shoving the quilt under, and it helps you so that the quilt slides a little bit more smoothly and evenly under the machine, and that's going to help you get better stitches as well. Now here's another recent use I've found for my quilting gloves. I will wear one glove while I'm attaching my binding, and again, because of that grippiness on the gloves, it allows me to push the quilt under the machine nice and smooth when I'm attaching the binding. A final way you can wear the gloves is if you want a little bit of a hand protection when you are cutting fabrics. I found that it was very easy. It allowed me to grip the ruler and made the whole process much easier. So my next tool that's nothing really revolutionary, but I use it all the time, is called my crease marker. Now, this is also known as a Hera tool, but whatever you call it, it's a nice piece of plastic that's thinner at the edges so that you can crease a nice line to follow when you're doing your machine quilting. I use this one all the time. So let's take a look and I'll demonstrate how I mark lines on my quilt. So one method I use is drawing a freeform straight line that doesn't have to be perfect, and then I will stitch on top of that line with a freeform organic wavy line. If I want more precise line placement, then I'm going to use a straight edge such as an acrylic ruler, and I'm going to run the crease marker right next to the edge of that ruler. That will place a crease exactly where I want it to go. In this particular design, I was marking straight lines wherever I did not have a seam line to follow, and that way I could stitch right on top of that line. Now, whether or not I stitch a straight line design or a wavy line design, having that nice straight reference line keeps me going exactly where I want to stitch on this quilt, and it makes sure that my lines line up parallel just like I want them to. There are many other applications for the creasing tool. You can basically mark anything with a straight line, no matter how simple or how complicated. And the best part is you don't have to wash out the lines. The creases will disappear over time. So make sure you grab my crease marker and add it to your toolbox if you don't already have one. The next notion I'm excited to talk about is my Ergonomic rotary cutter. It has a very soft, comfortable handle, and you can store it upright when not in use. It has a locking mechanism where you can lock the blade open or close, and it's very comfortable to work with. Now, unfortunately, it's only available for right-handed use, but the best thing about it is it comes with a set of 5 blades in the package. It's a great value just for the blades. So let's take a look, and I will show you how I store it, how I use it, and how I change the blade. So what's really unique about this rotary cutter is that you can stand it up on end whenever you're not using it. You can also lay it down as well. It has a retracting mechanism that pushes the guard out of the way whenever you're ready to cut. You can lock the blade open or closed depending on what you want to do. When I'm done using it for the day, I make sure to lock it closed, and a lot of times when I'm doing lots and lots of cutting, I will lock it with the blade open. Now here's how you change the blade. What I do is I unwrap the little nut and I take out all the little pieces of the rotary cutter and lay them out exactly as I want them to in order. You could always mark it with a marker or nail polish so you know which side is up, but it's usually not that big of a deal. So I'm pulling out the blade and all of the parts all the way in order. You'll notice that the hole has a very specific shape so that when you put the blade back in, it's going to lock into place. I can put a new blade on it, or in this case, I'm using the original blade since it's brand new. And you can kind of wiggle that blade into place so that it locks right where it's supposed to go. Put the little mechanism back together and tighten the screw. I always like to test cut with some scrap fabric to make sure that the blade is good and there's no nicks and everything is working properly. And I give it a little bit of a squeeze for good measure. And I'm ready to cut my next project. Again, I can store it so it stands up, or I can lay it down flat, whatever I'm gonna do. Now here's a little bit of that rotary cutter in action. I like to layer 3 to 4 layers of fabric when I'm cutting, and the blade can actually handle up to 6, especially if it's nice and sharp. So I'm gonna put my rotary cutter right there exactly where I want the cut to be, and I always wanna make sure that I start cutting a little bit off of the fabric, and then I'm using my hand with the gloves on it to keep that long acrylic ruler nicely in place so it's not gonna wiggle on me, and then I take one fell swoop, a nice cut all the way across. You never want to cut towards you, and you never want to do any sawing action. You just want to make sure every cut is nice and clean, and then you're not going to have any snags on your fabric. Now, if you notice that you're having to push down a little bit harder after you've cut for a while, that means it's probably time to change the blade. But these seem to last for a long time, and this is a very comfortable cutting position. Of course, I really like the turquoise color, and my little logo is going to make your cutting magical. Finally, I have this tool set that I call a mini mat and ruler set that is revolutionary when you're at the machine. You might think, what in the world would I ever use this set for? It's so small. I mainly use it for 2 reasons. Number 1, I use it when I'm trimming up my binding tails right at the machine so I don't have to get up and go to my big mat, and when I'm making small trimming cuts at the machine, such as for snowball blocks or flying geese. Now, the ruler is about 5 inches square and the mat is 6 inches, so they work really well together. Let's take a look and I will show you both of those instances on how I use this set. Once you see it, you're gonna wonder how you lived without it. So here's how I trim and match my binding tails so I have a nice, smooth and flat binding. So I'm placing one end of the binding into the other, and then where the 2 meet, I'm going to mark a line. Now this is a straight end binding, but this works also if you're using a mitered binding. The important thing is that you want to mark the exact spot where the binding is going to join. Once you've marked that spot, you have to add a 1/2 inch for seam allowances, and that's where the little mat and ruler come in, because I can just make that small little trimming cut right there at the machine without having to take my big bulky quilt away from the machine. I can match the tails, and then I place a few pins, and then I'm going to sew that together. Again, I'm showing you this with a scrappy binding where I'm going to just use straight seams, but if it's a binding that's all one fabric, then I use mitered seams. Once that's all joined up, I can just finger press those seams open, fold up the binding, and then finish sewing it back in place. So using that mini mat and ruler set allows me to get that exact placement for where those binding tails are going to line up. So here's the second most important use for my little mini mat. If I'm sewing little small pieces that need to be trimmed off, I'd rather do it right at the sewing machine. So I whip out my little square mat and ruler, and I can make that trimming cut right there at the machine and keep on going. And it's such a game changer so that I don't have to keep getting up and down when I'm just doing these small little cuts right at the machine. Well, I hope you enjoyed the little demo of all 5 of my notions. Remember, whenever you use these notions, you're going to be a better quilter, guaranteed. If you want to find out where to get them, check out the description box of this video. I'd love to send some your way and help you enjoy quilting just like I do. I love adding notions to my toolbox, which really do the job. And I use these notions for every step of the quilt making process. From cutting, to piecing, to basting, to binding, and quilting, they really come in handy. So I hope you'll enjoy them too. Until next time, happy quilting.